You think you understand people. You are wrong. Ouch, right? Kind of abrasive. We all really want to believe that we are great judges of character, that we can accurately read intentions. But the uncomfortable truth? Most human behavior is driven by hidden, unconscious forces we just don't see. We're talking about deep motivations and emotional needs that people flat out refuse to admit. Because listen, people lie. And they don't just lie to you, they lie to themselves. They rationalize. They create these elaborate mental narratives to make sure they're always the hero of their own story. If you just walk around taking everyone at face value, you are absolutely going to be manipulated, exploited, or totally blindsided. Understanding this isn't being cynical, guys. It's the ultimate bedrock of realism.
So think of today as your personal survival guide for human interaction. We're going to systematically peel the onion of human nature, starting with our inner irrational core, the illusion of rationality and the narcissism in everyone. Then we'll look outward at masks and role-playing and compulsive behaviors. Finally, we'll cover strategic positioning with the power of scarcity and elevating your perspective. By the time we finish this list, I promise you, you'll have a completely new lens for viewing literally every relationship in your life.
All right, kicking things off with Law 1, the illusion of rationality. This is the foundation everything else is built on. Honestly, the biggest myth you and I tell ourselves every single day is that we are these objective, completely logical beings making reasonable choices.
And this brilliantly illustrates the real problem. Look at the stark mismatch here. On the left, you've got the emotional self. This thing is ancient. It evolved over millions of years. It's lightning fast and overwhelmingly powerful. Then on the right, our rational self. Evolutionarily speaking, this is practically a brand new beta feature. It's slow to boot up, and it's pretty weak. It's basically just a super thin, fragile layer stretched tightly over a massive churning emotional core. Now, your emotions evolved to keep you alive, right? Fear made you run from a predator. But in modern life, this ancient hardware misfires all the time. We literally react to a mildly critical email from our boss as if a saber-toothed tiger just jumped out of the bushes. And when these two sides clash, emotion almost always wins.
This quote just hits the nail on the head. You decide emotionally, then rationally, logically. You feel first, and you think second. When you get angry, your emotional state literally distorts your reality. Suddenly, everything looks like a threat. So, how do you actually master your own irrationality? The absolute key here is to delay your reaction. When you feel that massive surge of emotion, you've got to create a wedge of space. Don't reply right away. Give your slow, weak, rational mind the time it needs to catch up, engage, and ask, wait, is this feeling giving me accurate information, or is it just distorting my reality?
Which brings us to Law 2, and another incredibly uncomfortable reality: the narcissism in everyone.
Okay, let's clarify something real quick. Everyone has a normal, healthy level of narcissism. It's basic survival. You're the center of your own universe. Your toothache feels way more real to you than someone else's broken arm. But what we're defining here is deep narcissism. This isn't normal, it's a toxic, pathological state. Deep narcissists are completely missing the empathy chip. They literally cannot see things from another person's perspective. And while they might project this super loud, grandiose exterior, underneath, their egos are incredibly fragile. When they feel threatened, they snap into rage and manipulation. Listen, if you spot someone who's constantly dominating conversations, fishing for compliments, and always blaming others, recognize the danger. They will use you and discard you. Avoid them if you can. And if you can't, manage them really carefully.
Now, for the rest of the normal people in your life, the ultimate antidote to everyday human narcissism is empathy. But I want you to completely rethink empathy. Forget the soft, feel-good, warm and fuzzy version. Think of empathy as a highly calculated, strategic tool for reading people. Just follow this mental exercise. First, actively imagine their inner world. Put yourself in their shoes. Second, identify what they actually want from you in this specific moment. And third, discover their insecurities. When you actively map out what someone fears and what motivates them, you stop triggering their defenses. Suddenly, you can communicate and influence them with absolute precision.
So, as we peel back these layers, we transition from the internal world to the external with Laws 3 and 4, masks and hidden compulsions. This is where we encounter the highly curated personas people present to the world. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how an outward mask almost always reveals the exact opposite of what it claims to be. We all roleplay, sure, but look at that first column. The guy projecting that super loud, dominating confidence, he's almost certainly covering up deep, agonizing insecurity. Think of that one coworker who never stops boasting about crushing their targets. Usually, they're the one most terrified of being exposed as a fraud. The excessively judgmental moralist, often hiding a massive secret vice. The person constantly swearing their undying loyalty to you, yeah, they're usually the one prepping the betrayal. To see through the mask, you have to look for the cracks. Watch people in unguarded moments, when they're stressed, exhausted, or think nobody important is paying attention. That's when the mask slips. And when the mask slips, true character is revealed through historical patterns. Because, let's be real, people do not change easily. Instead, they operate on these deep compulsions, usually baked in during childhood. You've got to study someone's track record. Unconscious compulsions put people on an infinite loop. They walk into the exact same traps over and over. If someone tells you every single one of their exes is crazy, that's a pattern. If they have some wildly dramatic reason for rage quitting every single job, that's a pattern. They are compulsively recreating old dynamics. Do not be naive and think you're going to be the one to magically fix them. You're not the exception. The pattern will absolutely repeat with you.
Spotting those patterns is how you protect yourself. Let's shift gears to Law 5, the power of scarcity. This is all about how you strategically position yourself with everyone else.
Human psychology is honestly wired on a very simple rule. We really value what is elusive and we ignore what's abundant. Look at the contrast here. If you practice constant availability, you're always saying yes, always accommodating, dropping your life the second someone calls, it does not make people appreciate you more. Actually, scratch that. It makes you practically invisible. It leads straight to indifference and being taken for granted. On the flip side, keeping a healthy distance creates massive value. And I'm not talking about playing petty, manipulative games. I mean having real personal boundaries, your own passions, and your own priorities. When you value your own time, you become slightly elusive, and that naturally commands respect and creates real desire.
Almost at the finish line here. Let's transition to Law 6, elevating your time perspective. This tackles one of our absolute biggest vulnerabilities, being incredibly short-sighted. We are completely wired to react to immediate concerns. Let's move to and see how this builds across a timeline. At 0 seconds, say right in the middle of a conflict, your emotional self is screaming at you to react. It wants to fire back and win that immediate, petty battle. But if you do, you usually end up losing the war. The trick is to mentally force yourself down this timeline. Stop and ask, okay, if I fire off this totally unhinged, emotionally charged message to my boss right now, what are the developing consequences in 6 months? Where does this leave my strategic standing in 5 years? Elevating your time perspective shifts you away from being a reactive victim of the moment, turning you into a patient, strategic operator who controls the long-term outcome.
Wrapping up this explainer on the first half of Greene's laws, our core theme comes down to this. Realism is your protection. Seriously, understanding these dark foundations that we're all fundamentally irrational, naturally narcissistic, and constantly hiding behind masks, it doesn't make you a bitter cynic. It gives you a superpower. The power to see the world exactly as it is instead of how you wish it was.
So I want to leave you with this question. Will you continue to be blindsided by the myth of rationality, or are you ready to use these uncomfortable truths to actually protect yourself starting today? You've got the lens now. Take these tools, go out, observe the patterns around you, and start experimenting. Let's just rip the Band-Aid off and confront an uncomfortable truth right out of the gate. You think you understand people. You probably think you can easily read their intentions. Well, you're wrong. The reality, the messy reality, is that people lie. And honestly, not just to each other. They lie to themselves all the time. They rationalize, they self-deceive, and they spin these incredibly elaborate, comforting stories just to make themselves look good. So I've got to ask you directly. What hidden forces are actually controlling you right now? Like, what's really operating just beneath your surface? Because if you just take people, and yep, that includes yourself, at face value, you're inevitably going to get manipulated, exploited, or totally blindsided. If you want to protect yourself, you literally have to learn how to see beneath that surface. Here's our psychological roadmap for today. We've got 6 stops. First, the hidden unconscious forces. Second, defensiveness and toxic envy. Third, self-sabotage and the shadow. Fourth, grandiosity versus reality. Fifth, reconnecting your fractured identity. And finally, number 6, the power of purpose. We're definitely going to descend into some uncomfortable truths today, but stick with me because I promise we'll climb back out toward wholeness and purpose by the end. All right, let's jump straight into section 1, the hidden unconscious forces. Because taking people at face value, yeah, that simply doesn't work in the real world.
Here's the thing. Most behavior isn't driven by logic or even by what people say their intentions are. It's actually governed by this whole set of unseen factors. We're talking unconscious behavioral patterns, hidden motivations, deep emotional needs that we absolutely refuse to admit, and this compulsive drive for self-deception. I mean, think about it. We've all had that colleague who claims they just want what's best for the team, right? But then they constantly subtly undermine everybody else to get ahead. Once you realize these unseen factors govern practically every interaction, you stop just reacting to the words coming out of people's mouths, and you start reading the reality of what they actually do. It's a total game changer.
And that naturally brings us to the social frictions we inevitably face when dealing with fragile egos. Section 2, Defensiveness and Toxic Envy. And this kicks off with what Greene calls the law of defensiveness.
Okay, so everyone has a self-opinion. It's this internal story we tell ourselves that we're smart, we're moral, we're totally rational. But secretly, that self-opinion is deeply, deeply fragile. If you attack someone's self-image directly, oh man, you are going to trigger massive resistance. They're going to dig in and they're going to fight you. So instead of going on the attack, use this simple 3-step framework to just bypass that resistance entirely. Step 1, confirm their self-opinion. Make them feel validated and secure. Step 2, acknowledge what they're actually right about. Find that common ground. And step 3, plant your new ideas really gently so they feel like they arrived at the conclusion themselves. And look, this isn't about being manipulative. It's just understanding human nature. People only open up when their ego feels safe.
Which brings us to one of the most fiercely denied, yet incredibly destructive emotions in the entire human experience, envy. And I really want you to notice the stark contrast here. Jealousy is actually pretty simple. It's just the fear of losing something you already possess, like being afraid someone might take your partner or your job. But envy is wanting what someone else has and actively resenting them for having it. It's this passive, incredibly corrosive emotion that just quietly poisons relationships from the inside out.
Now, since people almost never come right out and express envy directly, you've got to learn to spot the covert behaviors. Let's look at a few. Are you getting excessive praise from a coworker, but it just kind of lacks any genuine warmth? Yeah, that's a massive red flag. What about a friend who subtly diminishes your achievements? Maybe they constantly highlight your privileges or chalk all your incredibly hard work up to just good luck. Or how about someone who deliberately creates obstacles for you, all while maintaining this perfectly friendly, supportive facade? Those right there are the true signs of envy. And envious people are dangerous, folks, because they will absolutely sabotage you from the shadows. So pro tip, the absolute best way to deflate envy directed at you is to just stop bragging. Emphasize your own struggles, your effort, and your flaws instead. Keep it real.
But hey, enough about protecting ourselves from other people, right? It's time to turn that mirror inward and face our own inner demons. Section 3, Self-Sabotage and the Shadow. And we're kicking this off with the law of self-sabotage.
I want you to really think about your own patterns for a second. Are you constantly recreating painful relationship dynamics? Like maybe dating the exact same emotionally unavailable archetype over and over again? Or are you procrastinating on some major project because deep down you're actually terrified of the pressure that comes with success? Or maybe you're creating these totally unnecessary emotional tests just to prove to yourself that someone will eventually abandon you. We do these things entirely unconsciously, just to confirm our own limiting beliefs that were formed way back in early life. And to stop this vicious cycle, you've got to take radical responsibility. I know, it's so much easier to blame your circumstances or just chalk it up to bad luck. But if the exact same problem keeps showing up in your life, just wearing different faces, well, you are the common denominator. So, the crucial point here is understanding Greene's law of repression, which centers entirely on this concept of the shadow. Drawing on Carl Jung's work, the shadow is basically your disowned self. It holds all those deeply repressed qualities, like aggression, selfishness, or cruelty, that we absolutely refuse to see in ourselves. But here is the really uncomfortable truth. Whatever you harshly judge and obsess over in other people is almost always exactly what you are repressing in yourself. It's wild, right? When you deny your shadow, it doesn't just disappear. It leaks out in really destructive ways and controls you unconsciously. You literally have to own it to take away its power. And honestly, confronting our shadow perfectly sets up our next stop. Section 4, Grandiosity versus Reality. This explores the law of grandiosity, and it deals heavily with those delusions of identity that distort our perception and ultimately hold us back.
Let's be real. Everyone has grandiose fantasies of being special or important. It's human. But there are two very different states of this:
Positive grandiosity, that's ambition and confidence that's actually backed by competence, real sweat equity effort, and a grounded, realistic path forward. Negative grandiosity, on the flip side, is just pure delusion. It's the expectation of this magical success without putting in any of the actual work. Think of that aspiring entrepreneur who goes out and finances a flashy sports car just to look successful, before they've even launched a viable product. We've all seen it. Negative grandiosity is so dangerous because it makes us ignore crucial feedback. We overestimate our abilities and then we just blame external factors when reality inevitably hits us like a ton of bricks. Grandiose people consistently overpromise, and eventually, they crash. You absolutely must know your limits and actively seek out honest, brutal feedback.
Now, to truly ground ourselves, we've got to look at how we tend to split ourselves right in half. Section 5, reconnecting your fractured identity. This covers the law of gender rigidity. And just to be super clear right off the bat, we are talking strictly about psychological wholeness here, not biological sex.
See, every single human possesses both masculine and feminine psychological qualities. It's a spectrum, but our culture often fiercely pressures us to repress one side. If you have a repressed masculine side, well, that usually manifests as passivity, an inability to set boundaries, and just chronic over-accommodation, always people-pleasing. If you have a repressed feminine side, you're going to see emotional unavailability, rigidity, and some pretty severe difficulties with vulnerability and intimacy. When you don't integrate both those assertive and empathetic qualities within yourself, you remain psychologically incomplete. And honestly, what's worse is you end up projecting your missing half onto your partner. You expect them to do all the emotional or all the assertive labor for you. And trust me, that inevitably breeds massive resentment.
Let's keep moving and see how all of this builds into our final ascent out of the darkness. Section 6, the power of purpose. Here we're exploring Greene's law of aimlessness.
So here's the ultimate antidote to feeling aimless. Purpose is a filter. It literally eliminates distractions. Think about it. Most people just kind of drift through life. Without a clear purpose, you're just living reactively, constantly bowing to other people's agendas, cultural pressures, and all the expectations of your family or your boss. And here's a massive takeaway. Purpose isn't just something you magically discover out there in the world. It is something you actively create, you choose, and you commit to. Having a purpose tells you exactly what to say yes to. But far more importantly, it finally gives you the power to say no.
As we wrap up Greene's brand of practical realism, I want you to remember this quote. This darkness is truth, and truth, however uncomfortable, is useful. When you understand human nature, you are not blindsided. Studying these laws, looking at the shadow in the envy, it's not about becoming some cynical, judgmental person. Not at all. It's simply about becoming realistic. Understanding these hidden forces acts like a psychological protective shield against manipulation and exploitation. It is absolutely the ultimate tool for navigating your relationships, leading successfully, and ultimately, building a much better life. Which leaves us with one final, deeply provocative question for you to chew on today. Are you being driven by your chosen purpose, or are you secretly being driven by your unconscious shadow? I want you to really truly observe your own automatic patterns this week. Confront those uncomfortable truths head on. Start integrating that shadow and actively choose your own path. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, guys. Remember to keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next one.